It all began gradually. You know how these things go. Just small things at first. Nothing that really set off alarms. Rachel, my wife of 6 years, started acting strangely. At first, I tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was stress from work. We all go through tough patches, right? But over time, those little oddities began stacking up, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. She started leaving for work earlier and coming back later, always claiming extra meetings or looming deadlines. I'd sit at home, waiting for her to return, and when she finally walked in, she hardly acknowledged me. She'd be glued to her phone, staring at the screen, while I just sat across from her feeling invisible. The house that used to echo with laughter was now filled with nothing but cold silence. I hate to admit it, but one night, I couldn't fight the curiosity any longer. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter, and while I was cleaning up, I noticed a message flash on the screen. It was brief, something like, "Can't wait to see you." My stomach dropped. I shouldn't have seen it, but I did. And the smile on her face when she read that message? I hadn't seen her smile like that in months. Not when she was around me, at least. That's when the doubt started to creep in. I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe it was just a coworker, just a friendly exchange. But the anxiety started to fester inside me, eating away at my peace, little by little. Something was off with her, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it wasn't good. So, I started paying closer attention to her. The things I hadn't noticed before suddenly jumped out at me. She changed her phone password, which on its own might not have meant anything, but it felt off. Why all the secrecy now? We used to share everything. Our days, our little jokes, everything. But now, nothing. The warmth that once flowed between us had vanished. Every time I tried to get close to her, there was a wall. She'd either brush me off or claim she was too tired. I told myself it was just stress, maybe something personal she wasn't ready to talk about. But that excuse didn't hold up for long, and the distance between us kept growing. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where things had gone wrong. Then came the whispers. You know how mutual friends can be. Sometimes they mean well, sometimes they don't. But when I kept hearing things like, "I saw Rachel having lunch with that guy from her office," it stuck with me. And the same guy, over and over again. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who thinks everything's a threat. But when the name kept popping up in different conversations, I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was like my mind was on the edge of unraveling. I didn't want to accuse her without proof. What if I was wrong? What if I was just imagining things? But what if I wasn't? That's when I turned to Megan. Megan lived next door. We'd been neighbors for years, and she was always friendly. She'd gone through a tough divorce a couple of years back, so I figured if anyone could give me perspective, it was her. One afternoon, we were having coffee on my porch when I decided to bring it up. I didn't dive straight into it, though. I wasn't that blunt. Instead, I mentioned how distant Rachel had been lately and how I wasn't sure what to think. Megan didn't say much at first. She just listened. But then she asked me a question that stuck with me. Do you trust her? I remember sitting there, silent for a long time. The truth was, I didn't know anymore. I wanted to, but the doubt had already taken root. And no matter how much I wanted to believe it was nothing, I couldn't. Megan, as perceptive as she was, didn't sugarcoat things. She told me she'd seen situations like this before, when people start hiding parts of their lives. She didn't come right out and say Rachel was cheating, but she didn't dismiss it either. She told me to keep an eye on things, to pay attention to the details. People who have nothing to hide don't hide anything, she said. And man, did that hit hard. So, for the next few weeks, I became more cautious. I wasn't about to blow up my marriage over rumors and suspicions without some solid proof. I watched. I waited. Every little thing she did, every late night, every message she quickly tapped on her phone, it all felt like a clue. It was strange because the more I watched, the more it felt like I was pulling away from her emotionally, like I was preparing myself for the worst. I'd catch her laughing at something on her phone, and I'd wonder, was that for me or for him? And every time she kissed me goodnight without even looking me in the eye, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Megan and I talked more often during this time. She became my sounding board, the one person I could vent to without fear of judgment. She never pushed me one way or another, but she reminded me that I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. I wasn't imagining things. One night, after a few too many beers, I unloaded everything on Megan. I told her about the message, the rumors, the coldness at home. I felt like an idiot for not confronting Rachel directly, but I didn't have the courage to do it. Megan didn't laugh. She didn't call me stupid. Instead, she leaned in and said, "John, you need to find out for sure. Don't let this eat you up, but be careful." And just like that, I became the detective in my own marriage, trying to piece together a puzzle I wasn't even sure existed. After that conversation with Megan, things started moving fast. It wasn't like I'd planned for it to go this way, but once that seed of doubt was planted, I couldn't sit idly by. I needed answers. I couldn't keep living in this weird state of uncertainty, second-guessing everything Rachel did. It was driving me insane, eating away at me from the inside out. Megan had this uncanny ability to make everything feel so normal, like it was completely reasonable for us to start keeping tabs on my own wife. I didn't even feel guilty about it. In hindsight, maybe I should have, but when you're caught up in something like this, when you're convinced your wife is hiding something from you, guilt isn't exactly at the forefront of your mind. You're just trying to survive it. We began with small steps. I didn't want to come across as obsessive or desperate, so the first thing I did was pick up her phone when she'd leave it around. I'd casually scroll through her messages or check her social media, not expecting to find anything, but hoping to catch a glimpse of something off. It's amazing how easily people forget that their phones are like open windows into their lives. But Rachel wasn't as careless as I thought. Her messages were spotless, too spotless. Everything was so clean. It was almost like she was hiding something. If she was talking to someone she shouldn't be, she wasn't doing it on her regular chats. She had to be using some secure app or clearing everything out right after. What frustrated me more? Knowing she was hiding something, or being completely helpless to prove it. That's when Megan suggested we step things up. "You can't just wait around for her to slip up," she said one evening, her voice casual but serious as we sat on my porch. It was late, and the moon hung low, casting a strange light across the yard. "You need to start tracking her. Be smarter about it." I remember thinking she was joking. What was I supposed to do? Follow my wife like some sort of private investigator? But Megan wasn't joking. She was dead serious. "We'll do this together," she said, leaning in, her voice quieter now. "You're not on your own in this." And just like that, Megan and I got to work. While I was at work, she kept tabs on Rachel. Whenever I could, I'd reach out to friends or acquaintances to figure out where Rachel was. It wasn't as difficult as I expected. Rachel's routine was pretty predictable, except for the moments when she'd go missing. Those lunch meetings or late nights at the office, those were the ones Megan and I focused on. We developed this strange rhythm, almost like we were a team, working together to uncover the truth. We'd meet up afterward to share what we'd learned, piecing it all together like detectives on a case. But those late-night talks started shifting. At first, we'd only talk about Rachel, but before long, we were discussing our own lives, our disappointments, our regrets, the things we wished we'd done differently. Megan had this way of looking at me like she understood exactly what I was going through, without needing to hear the details. Her eyes. Damn, I hadn't been looked at like that in a long time. Not since the early days with Rachel, when everything still felt right. It felt good, really good, to have someone see me again. One night, after a few too many beers, I let my guard down. What if she really is cheating? What do I do then? Megan didn't hesitate for a second. "You don't just catch her," she said, leaning closer, her voice almost a whisper. "You get what's yours. You've been put through hell, John. You deserve it." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Revenge wasn't something I had even considered until that moment. But once Megan planted that idea in my head, it wouldn't go away. Why should I sit here, torn up inside over her betrayal, while she's out there living her best life with someone else? It wasn't right. I deserved more. The more time I spent with Megan, the more I realized how much was missing from my marriage. It wasn't just about the physical side of things, though that had been lacking for ages. It was the connection, the closeness. I hadn't had anyone actually listen to me in years. Rachel was always too distracted, too distant, too tired. But Megan? She was there, fully present, and I found myself looking forward to those late-night conversations. She'd touch my arm when she laughed, and I'd get lost in it. And yeah, I'll admit, there was a part of me that got a rush from the danger of it all. The sneaking around, never knowing what was going to happen next. It was addictive. But we didn't just watch Rachel anymore. We started planning. We mapped out her schedule, figured out when she'd be out, when she'd sneak away. It wasn't hard to notice when she'd go for lunch with that guy from the office. I started recognizing his name whenever I heard it, even though Rachel never mentioned him to me. It was like we were building a case against her. And with every new piece of the puzzle, every late-night meeting, I felt more justified in what we were doing. Megan became my anchor during all of this. I'm not sure how I would have gotten through it without her. We were in this together, but it wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It was about us. Something had started to grow between Megan and me, something I hadn't seen coming. One night, after another evening of investigating, Megan and I were sitting on her couch, talking about life, when out of nowhere, she leaned over and kissed me. I didn't stop her. Hell, I didn't even want to stop her. In that moment, everything felt strangely right. It wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It wasn't about catching her red-handed or proving she was wrong. It became about me. What I needed, what I deserved. Megan was there, giving me everything Rachel had taken away. The lines between revenge and desire started to blur, and I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Megan wasn't just an ally anymore. She was an escape from the misery that had overtaken my life. She made me feel alive again. Even though I knew my marriage was crumbling, part of me didn't care anymore. I was already in too deep. The day everything changed started like any other. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, when Megan called. "I've got something," she said, her voice low, serious. My heart jumped into my throat. For a second, I thought I might choke. We'd been watching, waiting for weeks, but nothing had come of it. Not until today. "She's meeting him," Megan continued. "Tonight, there's a reservation at that fancy Italian place downtown. 8 o'clock. I didn't even care how she knew. Honestly, I was past asking questions. All I could think about was that this was it. This was my moment. My chance to see everything for myself. No more wondering. No more doubts. Tonight, I would get my proof. But then a wave of dread hit me. Could I really handle it? Watching Rachel with him? I wasn't sure I had the strength for that. The thought gnawed at me for the rest of the day. It felt like my insides were being twisted into knots. The anticipation was eating me alive, almost worse than the betrayal itself. Megan was steady as always, though. She came over that afternoon, and we sat down in the living room to go over the plan. "We'll go together," she said, her voice calm, almost soothing. "We'll sit at a table nearby. You don't have to confront her if you're not ready," Megan added. "Just see it for yourself. That's all." I nodded, trying to keep it together. But inside, my stomach was turning. Megan guided me through every detail, step by step. "Don't stare at her too much," she warned, her hand lightly resting on my arm. "We don't want her to know we're there right away. Let her get comfortable." How was I supposed to act normal when my wife was sitting just a few tables away with another man? I wasn't sure. But Megan was right. This was the moment of truth, and I couldn't let it slip away. When the time finally came, I was a wreck. I barely remember driving to the restaurant. It was one of those upscale places Rachel and I used to visit on anniversaries. Dim lighting, candlelit tables, the whole romantic atmosphere that now felt like some sick joke. Megan had already made the reservation, and she had us seated in a spot where we had a clear view of where Rachel and her companion would sit. The hostess led us to our table, and I tried to breathe, tried to act like I wasn't about to watch my world implode. Megan ordered wine, but I couldn't even think about eating. My palms were sweating, and I kept glancing at the entrance, waiting for them to walk in. Megan, calm as ever, poured me a glass of wine and told me to sip it slowly. "You've got this," she said, her voice steady. "We're just here to watch." And then they walked in. I don't even know what I was expecting, but seeing Rachel with him hit me like a punch to the gut. There she was, my wife, looking radiant, walking in with him like it was the most normal thing in the world. They laughed as the hostess led them to their table, just a few feet away from where Megan and I sat. I froze. I couldn't take my eyes off them. Matthews. I finally saw the face that had been just a name for months. He wasn't anything special, a regular guy in a suit. But the way he looked at her made it clear. There was something there. Something more than colleagues. They sat down, and I watched as they got comfortable. Matthews leaned in, whispered something in Rachel's ear, and she smiled. A real, genuine smile. One I hadn't seen in ages. It felt like watching a stranger, but this wasn't the woman I married. This was someone else entirely. Someone happy, carefree, with him. It tore me apart. My chest tightened. For a moment, I thought about leaving, walking out of there before I had to see any more. But Megan's hand found mine under the table, squeezing it gently. "Don't break," she whispered. "You need to see this through." So I stayed. I watched as they held hands across the table, as Matthews leaned in and kissed her on the cheek, smiling at her like they were the only two people in the world. My blood was boiling. I wanted to stand up, flip the table over, scream at them. But instead, I sat there, silently seething, my heart breaking with every passing second. Megan didn't say much. She didn't have to. Just having her there, next to me, was enough. Every so often, she leaned in and whispered something in my ear, helping me calm down when my rage threatened to take over. Then, somewhere during dinner, Megan dropped a suggestion. "You know," she said, her voice low, almost playful, "if you really want to get to her, maybe it's time we made our move." I turned to her, unsure of what she meant. She gave me a sly smile, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You want her to know that you know, right? Let's give her something to think about." Before I could say anything, Megan leaned in and kissed me right there, in front of everyone. It wasn't just a quick kiss. It was slow, deliberate, calculated. When she pulled away, she glanced over at Rachel. And sure enough, Rachel was staring right at us. Her expression froze, and for a split second, the lightness in her face disappeared entirely. I don't know what came over me, but in that moment, I felt something I'd never expected. Satisfaction. Rachel had been playing her game for months, pulling the strings and lying to my face, but now it was my turn. If she wanted to mess around, fine, but she wasn't the only one who could play dirty. Rachel didn't come storming over immediately. No, she tried to keep her composure, like she could somehow pretend this was all normal. But I could see it in her eyes. She was livid. Her eyes flicked between our table and hers, her movements becoming more rigid, her body tense as she fought to maintain control. Megan leaned in, a quiet smile curling on her lips, watching the show unfold as we continued eating. We kept the conversation light, laughing, but the laughter felt hollow, all part of the act. Megan was pushing Rachel's buttons, and it was working. By the time we were halfway through our meal, Rachel couldn't hold it anymore. She shot up from her chair with such force it screeched against the floor, then stalked over to us. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her voice barely contained but loud enough to slice through the clatter of the restaurant. I looked up at her, as calm as could be, and shrugged. Having dinner. What else? Her gaze was fiery, her voice now ice-cold with fury. "Don't play games with me, John." But this time, I wasn't the one playing games. Megan gave my hand a reassuring squeeze under the table, silently reminding me that I had the power now. Rachel's perfect little world was falling apart, just like mine had. Sitting there, watching her struggle to control her emotions, a strange feeling of relief washed over me. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one left in the dark. I wasn't the one feeling powerless. She was. I could see the effort it took for her to keep it together. She glanced at Matthews, still sitting at their table, looking confused and slightly uncomfortable. Then her gaze snapped back to us, narrowing, her breath picking up. I could see the storm building in her, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she exploded. Then Megan leaned in and kissed me again. This kiss was slower, more deliberate. It was as if I could see Rachel's entire world shattering before me. Her fists clenched, her face contorting with rage, and without a word, she snapped. "Are you fucking kidding me, John?" she screamed, her voice piercing the silence of the room. Conversations died instantly, and all eyes turned toward us. The tension in the air was almost palpable, and I could feel every set of eyes on us, waiting for the next move. I didn't say anything. I just let her words hang in the air, watching her unravel. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life collapse. Megan was unflinching, taking a slow sip of her wine, looking perfectly at ease. Rachel's rage didn't faze her one bit. As she took another step toward our table, her voice rising with each word, I could feel the heat of the situation building. You sit here kissing her, while I'm with Matthews. Are you really that pathetic? You think this makes you better than me? She spat, her voice trembling with fury. Finally, I met her gaze, my voice calm and unwavering. No, Rachel, this isn't about being better. It's about the fact that you've been lying to me for months. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, but no words came out. She just stood there, red in the face, her breath shallow and quick. Around us, people were whispering now, murmurs spreading like wildfire as they watched the scene unfold. I could feel the weight of their gazes, their judgment. The whole room had become a silent audience to the destruction of my marriage. I'm not the one who's been sneaking around behind your back, I added, my voice steady but low. You think I didn't notice? And that was the moment she completely lost it. You don't get to play the victim here, she screamed, slamming her hands down on our table. The sound of glass rattling filled the air, and the couple at the table next to us flinched in surprise. You're a coward, kissing her in front of me like a child. You think this is some kind of revenge? You think this makes you look like a man? I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the pulse in my neck. But before I could respond, Megan stood up, her voice as cool as ever. I think he looks like a man who's finally done with your shit, she said, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. Rachel's eyes flicked to Megan, and for a moment, I thought she might go for her. The air was thick with hostility, like two people ready to snap. But instead of turning her wrath on Megan, Rachel shifted back to me. You think this is over, she snarled, her voice shaking with rage. You think you can just sit here flaunting this garbage in front of me and I'll walk away? That was when the staff stepped in. Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to calm down, one of the waiters said, his voice cautious, like he was afraid she might explode any second. But she was beyond reasoning. She shoved his arm away, eyes still fixed on me. You're a fucking joke, John, she screamed, her voice carrying across the restaurant. You and your pathetic little revenge plot. You think I care? You think this bothers me? Her voice echoed in the room, and the atmosphere shifted again. Now, the whole place was watching. Phones were out, cameras clicking, recording every second of her meltdown. The flashes of cameras and the beeping of texts filled the air. My heart pounded, but I didn't stop her. This was all on her, and I wanted everyone to see it. You're the one who destroyed us, I said, my voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. Not me. Rachel recoiled, her face contorting into a mask of contempt, but beneath the fury, I could see something else. Vulnerability. It was as if she hadn't expected this to unravel so publicly, so completely. She took a step back, glancing around, her eyes wide as if she was suddenly realizing just how many people had been watching the whole spectacle unfold. And just like that, something in her snapped. She turned on her heels and stormed out, pushing past the waiters and Matthews, who sat frozen at their table, still processing what had just happened. She didn't even look back as the door slammed behind her. For a moment, the restaurant fell into a stunned silence. Then, slowly, the whispers began. Some people laughed, others shook their heads, and the buzz of gossip spread like wildfire. The waitstaff scrambled to restore order, apologizing to nearby tables, but it was too late. The damage was done. Megan sat back down, her smile subtle but satisfied. She raised her glass, a silent toast to new beginnings. Well, that's one way to end it, she said softly, her voice laced with satisfaction. I sat there, my mind still reeling from everything that had just happened. Part of me was still in shock, unsure how to feel. But another part, a darker part, felt this strange sense of relief, maybe even satisfaction. Watching Rachel break down like that was confirmation of everything I had suspected. There was no going back now, but I knew the fallout wasn't over. not by a long shot. The next day, my phone buzzed constantly. At first, I thought it was just the usual mix of emails and messages, but when I checked, I saw something that took me by surprise. My phone was flooded with notifications, not from people I knew personally, but from social media, friends, acquaintances, random people. A video had surfaced. The video? Someone at the restaurant had filmed the entire confrontation. Rachel's meltdown, the shouting, the insults, everything, and posted it online. Within hours, it went viral. Thousands of views, people sharing it left and right. The title was brutal. Wife loses it after catching husband with another woman. Karma at its finest. I clicked on the video, my eyes glued to the screen as Rachel's face filled it, her voice barely audible over the grainy quality, but the fury in her expression was clear. In the background, I could see myself, calm, detached, and Megan, sitting there with the same unbothered expression. The comments were savage. This chick got exactly what she deserved. Imagine being this unhinged in public. Oh, I don't know who that guy is, but he handled it like a boss. As I scrolled through, I felt a mix of emotions bubbling up inside me. Part of me felt guilty, knowing how much her life was about to implode in front of everyone. But there was another part of me, maybe a bigger part, that was enjoying it. Her carefully constructed reputation was crumbling, bit by bit. People were tearing her apart, mocking her, dissecting every moment of that video. By the end of the day, the views had hit the tens of thousands. Everyone was watching her unravel, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. And the strangest part? I didn't feel sorry for her. Not at all. Rachel had betrayed me, lied to me, and now she was paying the price for it. For the first time in ages, I felt free. There was no going back, no fixing things. She had destroyed us, and now the world knew it too. After the restaurant explosion, life took a sharp turn. There was no more hiding, no more sneaking around. Megan and I made things official, and within days, she was staying over more often. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was real. She filled the gap I hadn't even realized had been there for so long. There was laughter again, real conversations, the kind of comfort I'd forgotten was possible. With Megan, I could finally breathe. My life felt lighter, even amidst the chaos. Rachel, on the other hand, was dealing with the aftermath of her public breakdown. The video had spread like wildfire. Within days, it had thousands of views. The comments were brutal, mocking her, and soon, they reached her workplace. I heard from mutual friends that her reputation was in tatters. Whispers circulated, people questioned her professionalism, and she became the subject of jokes at the office. She had always been so careful about her image, but now that image was shattered beyond repair. And then there was Matthews. The moment things got too big, he disappeared. I wasn't surprised. It didn't take long for him to realize he didn't want to be associated with her anymore. Not after the video went viral. He ghosted her completely, leaving her to clean up the mess by herself. Rachel tried to reach out to me, at first with a few simple, vague texts, things like, "Can we talk?" and "I miss you." I didn't respond. Then came the apologies, the confessions. She admitted she'd made a mistake and begged to fix things. But it was too little, too late. One day, she showed up at my house. I opened the door to find her standing there, looking broken, eyes red, face pale. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days, barely holding it together. "John, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Can we talk? I messed up, I know I did, but we can fix this." I just stared at her. The woman standing on my porch wasn't the confident, put-together Rachel I used to know. She looked desperate, pathetic. "There's nothing left to fix," I said, my voice cold. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. Her eyes flicked inside, and that's when Megan walked into the room, casually putting an arm around me. Rachel's face fell. She knew it was over. The tears stopped, and her expression hardened. Without another word, she turned and walked away. And just like that, the last sliver of hope she had was gone. After that, Rachel didn't try to contact me again. The texts stopped. The calls stopped. She was on her own. From what I heard, things weren't going well for her. Her job was on the line. Her friends were keeping their distance. And Matthews? He was long gone. The life she'd built was falling apart, all because of the choices she'd made. Meanwhile, my life with Megan was solid. It wasn't just about revenge. She wasn't a tool to get back at Rachel. She was someone I genuinely cared about. We built something real, and for the first time in a long time, it felt right. It was effortless. It felt freeing. And for the first time in years, I found myself actually looking forward to something again. Rachel was nothing more than a chapter in the past, a part of my life that had finally been left behind. As I walked forward with Megan by my side, I couldn't help but realize just how much better I was without her. It's strange how things can unfold in ways you never expect, isn't it? A year ago, if you had asked me where I thought I'd end up, I never would have predicted this. Sitting here with Megan beside me, I've had the chance to reflect on everything. I've thought about how far things went, the choices I made, and the person I became in the process. Revenge wasn't the plan, at least not initially. All I wanted was the truth. I needed to understand what happened to my marriage, to the woman I thought I knew. But once Megan and I started digging, once I saw the truth for what it really was, things shifted. What started as a search for answers became about something much more. It became about taking control, about righting the wrongs where I had felt powerless. And I did. I got my revenge. Watching Rachel's world crumble, seeing the realization on her face when she figured out I wasn't the fool she'd thought me to be, it felt satisfying, almost sweet. For a while, it felt justified. But now, as I look back, I wonder if it was truly worth it. Was it worth the destruction? The bitterness? The spectacle? Could things have been different if we had just been honest from the start? If we had communicated, really understood each other, maybe we wouldn't have ended up in this mess. Maybe the betrayal wouldn't have hurt so much. Maybe I wouldn't have felt the need to go to such extreme lengths to expose her. But life doesn't work that way. We made our choices, and now we both have to live with the results. I think about Rachel sometimes, not in a way that makes me regret the past, but in a way that makes me wonder if she's learned anything from all of this. The last I heard, she's still struggling to put her life back together. Alone now, trying to fix her career, her friendships, her reputation. Part of me feels bad for her. Not because she didn't deserve it, she did. But because I know how it feels to lose everything you thought you could count on. There's no real satisfaction in knowing she's suffering. Not anymore. The satisfaction came when the video went viral, when the whispers started circulating at her office, when Matthews ditched her like she was nothing. But that feeling has faded. The anger, the resentment, they no longer hold the same power over me. I found something better, something real, with Megan. And that's what really matters. Megan. She's been my rock throughout all of this. What started as a connection born out of shared pain grew into something deeper. She's not just the person who helped me expose my wife's lies. She's the one who's given me a fresh reason to embrace life again. With Megan, there's no need for secrecy, no ulterior motives. It's just us, looking ahead, building something new. It's funny how betrayal can lead you to paths you never saw coming. If Rachel hadn't cheated, if we hadn't gone through this storm, I might still be trapped in a loveless marriage, too blind to see that I deserved more. But Megan showed me that life doesn't have to be weighed down by bitterness. It can be about growth, about finding someone who truly gets you, who makes you feel important. That's what I'll remember from all of this. Not the revenge, not the fleeting satisfaction of watching Rachel's world collapse, but the realization that sometimes you have to face hell to come out the other side and find happiness. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean, but it's what I needed to go through to come out stronger. I've learned that while I can't control what others do, I can control how I react to it. And I chose to move forward. I chose to let go of the anger and embrace a new chapter. As for Rachel, I'm not sure where she'll end up. She's still trying to piece her life back together. Maybe she'll find a way to rebuild. Maybe she won't. Either way, it's no longer my concern. I'm done. Looking back, the last time I saw her standing on my porch, desperate and broken, I realized something important. She wasn't the villain in my story. She was just another person, like me, who made terrible choices. We both did. But I've learned from mine, and I've moved on. She's still caught in the consequences of hers. So here I am, in my house. No, our house, with Megan. The woman who helped me get through the hardest time in my life and has become the light I never knew I needed. We've built something good, something strong. And as I look forward, I can't help but feel that I've finally found my peace. It's funny, isn't it? How life throws curveballs when you least expect it, but sometimes those curveballs lead you exactly where you need to go. And for the first time in ages, I'm not looking back with anger, regret, or what-ifs. I'm just looking ahead.